The best part of the football season? Checking out the post-game stats. Which wideouts scored more than 2 touchdowns? Which quarterbacks threw for less than 350 yards? Think you can pick who will do what before kickoff? Then play Pick 6 from DraftKings, an official daily fantasy partner of the NFL. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app, select between 2 and 6 players, and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat. It's that simple. And for all our first-time Pick 6 players, check this out. New customers, play $5 on your first pick set, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code BALLERS. That's code BALLERS for new customers to play $5 on your first pick set and get $50 in Pick 6 credits only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits expire in 6 months. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
Introducing the new Versed Limitless Pant Collection. Reimagined to deliver effortless style, mobility, and comfort, the new Limitless Collection features moisture-wicking, 4-way stretch fabric that's wrinkle-resistant and doesn't lose fit. Plus, the updated design offers a functional and classic look with unmatched versatility. The new Versed Limitless Pant Collection. Pants made for movement. Available only at Dick's Sporting Goods. Shop now at dicks.com/limitless.
The DFS Studio is brought to you by DraftKings. Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast with your hosts, Kyle Borganoni and Matthew Betz.
Welcome in, boys and girls. It's the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I am joined, as always, by Matthew. It's a 10-unit banger bets.
Is that the kind of slate we have on our hands, Kyle? Just to take it to the bank, no questions asked, it's guaranteed to work type of slate. I feel good about it, man. I like this slate. I'm very excited. There's lots of angles, I think, on how to play it for tournaments. So we've got, 3 or 4 game environments that look awesome. This should be fun. I think we're going to see a very high-scoring slate, and it should be a lot of fun for tournaments and props as well. So let's get to it.
Yeah, and if by now we have one of our Discord members that will know if they're able to mortgage their future, because apparently Juwan Johnson over on the receptions was what we needed.
Maybe. By the time you're listening to this, you'll know if that's what we needed.
Okay, we did have a prop that Betz did ask me earlier. He's like, is this a 2-uni? Is this 2 units? Is this one of those things where I feel so strong about it? I will bring it up in our Pick 6, and it will be something that we get to share with our Discord. I think at the end of the day, if you are playing props, DFS, if you are looking at sides and totals, any of those things, we think that we can prepare you to play the right way and play with people we think are nice people. Like I just look at our Discord, I'm like, there's no jerks in there, or at least they get kicked out, but I've never seen them. I'm not in charge of that.
No, we are not in charge of that, thank goodness, because can you imagine? It's been a non-issue, honestly. Like Discord kind of in like the fantasy space got popular, what would you say, like maybe 3 years ago, something like that?
Yeah, 3, 4.
And at the time it was like, people usually aren't very nice online, let's be honest. So I was always a little worried about like what kind of folks might linger in there, but the Foot Clan, man, they're good people. So yeah, it's been really fun, and I'm learning a lot from people in there too. So come chop it up with us. It's good. And like Kyle said too, like over the weekend when people are posting their lineups or asking questions about tournament plays or what have you, like it's a great place to get your question answered too. So I love it. Discord's been great.
Yep, dfspass.com. Use the promo code DFSPod if you want to get access to all of our picks, if you want to get access to our props alert and props channel and DFS channel and Discord. That's only for those exclusive folk. And I'm even seeing some charts, some different things shared just from the people just getting to fine tune the process. But yeah, it's one thing about being online, which I know, Betz, you are never, ever logged off. But you gotta develop this online personality where people find you approachable, but also, you get to have clear boundaries. So like I've shared on this podcast all the time, don't love a start sit question, but man, if you ask me questions about stupid movie things or other things, like I'm all about, like I did an AMA the other day on X. Yeah, it was fun. I had about 45 minutes to spare. I was like, I haven't done this in a while. And man, when I see a start sit question, I'm like, it's not as fun. But if you ask me about just random food stuff or footballers, like random things, like that's fun.
Yeah, the way to get Kyle to answer your start sit questions or any other fantasy or
Trojan horse
question. Yeah, you got to ask a question or two first, get him to answer and reply to you. Then he'll feel obligated to reply to the next question, which will be the start sit. So you got to Trojan horse it in there. It's like when you're doing a trade in fantasy, like you don't go after the guy that you really want. You just, you open the conversation like, hey, I want this guy. Well, would you settle for that guy? You know what? I guess I'll settle for him. That's the guy you wanted the whole time, right? So you just gotta work the system to get Kyle to answer your fantasy questions.
Oh man, that's like the friend, and I love all of you guys out there, but the friend that's like, hey dude, it's great to hear from you. You're like, LinkedIn or Facebook or something, and about 5 messages in, they're like, I need to talk to you about financial planning. And you're like, come on, man. Come on. Like, can we just be friends for friends? Like, what? Don't do that to me. So don't do that with start sits either. We have an entire website that will give you the exact answer I will give you using our start sit tool on the website. That's the thing. And also, at the end of the day, it's like, I don't know. Like my brother-in-law, I will do that. Okay. My brother-in-law was just asking me over lunch, Tank Dell or Darnell Mooney. And I go, sure. Right?
Well, the answer is yes.
The answer, I said Tank Dell, but we're going to talk about Darnell Mooney today.
Oh, brother, we're going to talk about him. The Moon Man.
Yeah. My brother-in-law has special privileges. He can do that stuff, but like, man, don't get me going on that. But yeah, we will talk about week 7, our cash picks coming up right now. We will go over the games we want to stack. We're going to do 4 this week, slate breakers, and then a Borg versus Betz. And on the year, we are rolling. I'm at 9-3. Betz is at 7-4. Things are looking up in the prop streets. So let's get into our cash picks.
Straight cash, homie.
I need your help badly because when I'm putting together my cash lineups, and I've already started to do this, we're recording on a Thursday. This comes out on a Friday. There are like 3 dudes that I like absolutely want to play. But if I play them, it just looks so barren at other spots. So overall, before we get to specific plays for the different positions, how do you feel like this slate is turning out in terms of structure? Like, how are people going to mostly play it in cash and head-to-heads?
Yeah, so I think when you think about, like, again, the conversation we've been having all season, really, on DraftKings is the lack of, like, really good 3 and 4K wide receiver plays. There's 1 or 2 on the slate that I think are very viable, which we'll talk about, but there's not a ton of, like, easy stars and scrubs builds that work. And so as a result, a lot of the times this year, I've been playing more balanced where, at quarterback, it's somewhere in like the upper 5 to mid 6K range. The running backs, the 6K range looks very strong this week as well. It does. And then at wide receiver, it seems like we're always getting 6K wide receiver plays that project very, very, very well. So you kind of get these balanced builds as optimal. I think it's another week for that. We'll talk about maybe some punt tight ends. I don't love them. We'll talk about maybe a couple punt wide receivers. Again, don't love them. But man, at the same time, Justin Jefferson looks very, very good. Kyren Williams looks incredible. It's tough to fit those guys on this slate, honestly. I've played around with some lineups where you can fit one or the other, but playing both, I think, is, unless we get some crazy injury news today on Friday, is almost out of the question.
So I made some lineups where Kyren and Justin Jefferson are in there, and I am punting 2 spots, and I hate doing that. Like, I hate punting at tight end because I feel like this week, normally we'd be like, who cares, punt it off, 3K tight end. But there are some plays at 4K and above, and even Brock Bowers at 5,800, that's like, you're going to pay. Like, other people are actually going to pay up for that. So at quarterback, I do see some value. Like Geno Smith right now is my favorite points per dollar quarterback. He's 5.8. It's on the road at Atlanta. We've talked about that game. We'll talk about it again in just a second. So I think if I just were to look at salary adjusted stuff, Geno Smith is my favorite. And then the other 2 on my radar are Jaden Daniels and Jordan Love.
Yeah, Love is tough for me, right? Because the variance is so high. And you think about his touchdown rate, what is it, 8.4% this year? That's is certainly going to come down. But the matchup, relatively speaking, is easier through the air against Houston than on the ground. I think he's in no man's land this week. So like for me, he's a tournament only play. Let's start at the top. Jaden Daniels, like what is there to say, right? 7,600. If you want the safety and the upside of a guy like Jaden Daniels in cash, I totally get it. Taking on the Panthers, they have no talent. Washington has the highest team total on the slate, which by the way, has gone up a half point. So they're projected for 30 points on this slate. It's really hard for him to project that at that price and what he does with his legs. He gets the goal line rushing attempts too. It's just all there for Jaden Daniels. So I have no issues that anyone wants to play that. However, if you play him, it's very tough to fit some of the other studs. So it's just a matter of decision points for you on the slate. And if you drop down to Geno, which I'm kind of inclined to do, taking on the Falcons, we're going to talk about that game at length. This is a spot where just the pace looks awesome. The pass rate looks awesome. And Geno is just due for positive regression. Has exactly one touchdown pass in every single game, yet leads the league in passing. Marv highlighted him in his expected points model. By far the number one regression quarterback in the league. So this is a spot where I think we could get 2, maybe 3 passing touchdowns out of Geno. And even without the passing scores, he's still been very, very good for fantasy, just getting their volume. So 5,800, I'm inclined to take the discount. Almost $2,000 off Jaden Daniels is kind of where I'm leaning. That said, if anyone wants to play Jaden, he's in an unbelievable spot as well against the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, I think Geno's going to be the most popular in cash, and then probably Jaden, and then I think Jordan Love, yeah, if you want to put him as just a tournament play, we'll talk about that game. I think he's still too cheap for the insane upside we've seen. Like, we've seen him not just throw a couple touchdowns, throw 4 touchdowns, but like put up 30-plus point games. And you look at the rest of the slate, it's like, who else is going to be able to put up 30-plus DK points? There's not a lot of guys. So Geno's probably our top one. I did want to mention on FanDuel this week, and Betz, you can back me up, but the Atlanta Falcons are disrespected. I don't know who it is at FanDuel that set these prices, but they basically said, you know what? The Falcons aren't that good. Who really cares? But Kirk Cousins at 7.2 is an egregious price on FanDuel.
I messaged you yesterday, and I would say like I play almost 80% of the time on DraftKings. I'll play some FanDuel when I see some edges. I'm playing some FanDuel this week. I'm going to play some cash on FanDuel. It's just an unreal situation with the pricing over there, where I think Kirk Cousins is priced as the quarterback 16 in pricing on this slate. The Falcons have the second highest team total on this slate in the game that we like, where Seattle, they just cannot stop anybody right now. And we're still waiting on Reek Woolen, their top corner. He has not practiced at all last week, didn't practice Wednesday. We're waiting on Thursday's news, but he's been out with an ankle injury. And, just in the spot at home in the dome, a shootout potential, like Kirk Cousins looks great over on FanDuel. I think he's in play for tournaments on DK, but on FanDuel in particular, I think he looks quite strong.
At running back, there are 2 dudes that are standing out to me. So Kyron Williams at 8.1 at home as a 6+ point favorite. He's a touchdown machine. I feel like his price is finally at a spot where you have to like respect him, and in cash you have to be like, okay, this is what he needs to do. And in a tournament even, I feel like Kyron's one of those players like, man, I need you to get me 25. Like it's one of those things where he's priced up, but in cash, he's probably one of our top running backs. And then Chuba Hubbard at 6.5 on the road against Washington. His volume is just insane. We're not worried about Brooks yet. We've never been worried about Miles Sanders. And so Chuba Hubbard and Kyron are the 2 that stand out to me the most.
Yeah, let's start with Kyron. The tricky thing is just the price, right? 8,100 on DraftKings. He's at home taking on the Raiders. Najee Harris, for about a month there, was looking like he was running through quicksand. Last week against this Raiders defense looked electric. So I think Kyron is in an unbelievable spot this week at home. They're 6.5 point favorites. That line has moved since our Tuesday show. So basically they're a touchdown favorite. They're at home. He comes out of the bye week. He's just been seeing so much volume. So Kyron looks incredible in this spot against the Raiders. As for Chuba, 17 plus opportunities in 5 straight games. And in 4 of those games, he's seen 22 plus opportunities, specifically in the pass game. Like, that is where his value is just so good. He's seen a 14% target share since week 2. For a running back, that is elite usage. So Chuba, again, in this spot against Washington is very much in play. The Commanders, allowing 5.04 yards per carry. That is 29th in the league. So I like that spot for Chuba. And we're going to talk about Deontay here in a minute. He is, as of now, uncertain for this week. But if Deontay Johnson happens to miss this game, how does Chuba not just touch the ball over and over again? So I like this spot a lot for Chuba at Washington.
The other running backs that we'll talk about, Kenneth Walker, just apparently is a PPR machine. Nowadays, it's 21 targets in the last 3 weeks, which is awesome. He's way ahead of Zach Charbonnet in terms of routes. Last week, it was like 30 to like 12. So Kenneth Walker has morphed into a guy that we used to say, hey, are we going to get the touchdown? Are we going to be happy? Now it's like you're getting a floor. And I think at his price at 7,300, he's also solid. Would you be fine playing Geno and Kenneth Walker in cash?
So normally I don't like this, but I think this is a spot where it's okay because Geno is so cheap. Like at 5,800, you're really asking him to give you somewhere around 18 to 20 points. I mean, obviously you want more, but as a floor play, like that's kind of what you're looking for. So I think the two can coexist in this game just with how many points we project in the dome, like we talked about with the shootout. I think it's totally fine, especially because this year, Ken Walker's usage, like you talked about, is just so different. Whereas before it was like, yeah, he's not going to catch that many passes. To get there, he's got to probably hit 100 yards and at least one rushing score. But this year, like he's getting there on PPR volume. And obviously when he's catching the ball from Geno, those two are going to correlate. So I think it's fine. Like I'm not going out of my way to make that happen. But I think if that's what you land on, as far as how your salary construction works, I think that's totally fine.
All right, a couple more guys I want to mention. Tony Pollard on the road in Buffalo. We're not going to preview that game, but Buffalo is a run funnel defense, 31st in schedule adjusted points allowed. Also, by the way, one of the main ways that I do research, Betz does it too, is if you are a Foot Clan member, then you just get to sort every single week using the Stream Finder tool. Like it's so easy to look at matchups that I can see Buffalo, see what they've given up on the year, and then see what it's like schedule adjusted. And they've been terrible against the run. So Tony Pollard is the only Titan that you could imagine playing, and I think you could play him at 6,300. Ray Davis on the other side of the ball is the big question mark if James Cook is going to play with his toe. Do you know which toe it is, by the way?
Yes, it's the big toe.
Jimbo's toe.
It's the big toe.
Jimbo's big toe.
The great toe, as they call it.
Do they really call it that?
Yeah, in the medical world.
I did not know that. Is there other names for it? Like, does the, like, I know there's like the middle toe, the pinky, like what about the other ones?
No, those don't have a good name. Just the great toe.
Okay. Well, Jimbo's toe is a big deal, but Ray Davis was awesome if you saw him on Monday night. I feel like if we got news that Ray Davis was the play, then like at 5,200, I feel like he'd be locked in lineups. They're 9.5 point favorites, but that's kind of the big decision point, and we might not even know. He might not even be a thing.
Yeah, we have to wait and see till Friday. So make sure you're monitoring, later today and into the weekend, depending on James Cook's status. It's kind of funny for cash games. James Cook's great toe shapes the slate because without Ray Davis, it's very tough to fit Jefferson and some of these studs at the top. So 5,200, we need that salary relief. We'll see if that happens. The matchup is not great against the Titans, but the price tag is too good and the workload was too good that I would go there. I did want to ask you, how would you compare Chuba and Pollard? They're $200 apart on DK. Do you have systemic concerns about the Titans in this spot? Because I love Tony Pollard for the workload without Tajay Spears and the matchup, but like I have questions about them sustaining drives on the road in Buffalo with Will Levis.
Yeah, no, I think right now my choice would be to take Chuba and just take the overall game environment, especially with Washington now out Jonathan Allen on their defensive line. I mean, I did the game preview for this game, and I said that there is Josh Allen, and then there's a man on the other side of the football that's trying to impersonate Josh Allen, except he's doing a terrible job, and he's directly billable for Brian Callahan's medical needs. Like, he is like ruined. Like, Brian Callahan has aged so many years in the span of like 6 weeks. So I just hate the offense. He's been solid. And so he's one of those players that I'm seeing him kind of creep up in roster percentage. I'm like, is he essential this week? So I don't know. I lean Hubbard.
Okay. I'm with you on that one.
Okay, cool. And especially if Deontay's out, then Chuba's going to be super chalky, which is fine. At wide receiver, I cannot fathom looking at this slate without Justin Jefferson. I
better hope James Cook sits then.
Okay. Let me just tell you this about Justin Jefferson, because I'm like, should I just force him to my lineup? Should I lock button? What should I do? I love Justin Jefferson. Let me give you some context, Betz, because you're not really, you're a hand in the dirt kind of guy. You hate stats. Stats are for losers, right?
That's what me and Tomlin say.
Yeah, you, Tomlin, Jason Kelsey, all you guys, that's all you care about is, everybody's losers.
Mark Schlereth,
what if,
big football guy.
What if I told you that Justin Jefferson is the greatest wide receiver of all time at home? Of all time.
You could have just said it of all time. You didn't have to say
Period.
at home. I mean, he's on a historic pace. So go ahead.
Yeah, most fantasy points per game of all time at home. This is like compared to Jerry Rice, everybody else, 18 fantasy points per game, half point. Receiving yards per game. His line on DK right now is 92.5. He's averaged 103 receiving yards per game at home, and the Lions their secondary's improved from last year, but it's one that clearly you have to throw against. So I feel like Justin Jefferson at 8,500 is not expensive enough for me to avoid.
Yeah, he looks so strong. I mean, if you're playing multiple lineups this week, I can't imagine not getting some exposure to him in this game. Coming out of the bye week, just the pass rate against the Lions should be there. But I talked about that a lot last week with Pete, where I made CeeDee Lamb my slate breaker because I was just like, man, it's not going to work with Rico and Zeke. Like, they're going to have to throw. The game script played out the way I thought it would. Dallas just, laid a giant egg. They fell on their face. So I think the same situation is at play here. Kevin O'Connell is a very smart coach. He knows how to beat this defenses through the air with his best playmakers. So I love it. On top of that, Aaron Jones is banged up, right? So, like, would you really want to run Ty Chandler and Cam Akers into this, front seven over and over again? Of course not. On top of that, no Aiden Hutchinson. So the matchup gets better for Sam Darnold as far as the pressure is concerned. So yeah, Justin Jefferson just looks outstanding on this slate. Yeah,
Amon-Ra, we'll talk about that in a second. He looks awesome too when you think about the way that Minnesota does defense heavy on the blitz. So I like Amon-Ra a lot. So those two guys are the top pay up. You can't get them both in your lineup. I mean, somebody's going to be like, I can do it. And it's like, you're going to punt 3 spots. So I think the way that I see things breaking down in cash for me is if you can pay up for Jefferson and Amon-Ra, that's awesome. There's this 6K tier of if we knew Deontay Johnson was healthy, that's great. I think Drake London is probably the safest, especially that he's under 7K and he has arguably the best red zone role of any wide receiver in football, which is crazy. So I think London at 6.9 is probably the guy that I'll put in my lineup and just lean into the game environment and lean into the fact that he's getting high value targets.
Not just high value, but all of the targets. So many targets. 12, 13, 10 targets over the last 3 weeks for a 30% target share.
I love it so much.
They're just feeding him so much volume. So yeah, he should be probably like 7,800 from his role and his usage. So in this matchup, again, we mentioned Reek Woolen looks very doubtful for this spot. So even if he plays, I think Drake London is fine. But just the Seahawks defense has major issues right now. And we saw that last week on Thursday night. They gave up a ton of big plays to Debo and the Niners. So yes, give me Drake London. 6,900 is a great tag for him.
What are your thoughts on Malik Neighbors? We're getting some information that he still has to be evaluated by an independent neurologist, but it is trending in the right direction. 7,500. Is he more of a tournament play for you, or are you looking at him in cash?
I think he's cash viable. I mean, the last time we saw him on a field, he's just earning targets at an unreal rate. So yes, he's always in play, especially with full PPR scoring. The only thing for me is just the pricing structure, right? Where it's like, if you play Jefferson and Neighbors, you're stretched pretty thin everywhere else. If you want to play Njoku or Bowers, you're stretched thin again. So like, it's just more a matter of pricing that I think he should be in your player pool. But for me, I lean more of a tournament play just given the pricing structure. But if anyone wanted to play him in this matchup, assuming he is cleared and healthy, I think it's totally fine.
I think the hardest part this week is trying to figure out how your lineup fits together. So, if you're like, hey, man, I really want Jefferson or Kyron, I want London, you need to also find options in this lower tier. And so Darnell Mooney, I think, is another player that you can play in cash if you just want to step down from London. But it's like these 4K dudes we're trying to figure out. Who knew that it would be week 7 and the dude we'd be talking about to unlock the slate would be Juju Smith-Schuster? 4K. I'm surprised his salary remains this low.
I literally wrote in the cash article on the DFS Pass, I honestly couldn't even fathom writing up Juju for cash games in the year 2024, but here we are. I mean, 8 targets before the bye week. I think he's the most likely receiver to just continue to be in that quote-unquote Rashee Rice role, where he's getting those short area targets and trying to do some stuff after the catch. I think Xavier Worthy's role will grow as the year goes on, but behind Kelsey, I'm not sure Mahomes really trusts anybody else. And I think Juju is pretty safe for maybe not a big ceiling. I don't think we should expect 7 for 130 again, but I don't know, 4 for 50, 4 for 60, something like that. Like, I think that's totally in play on this slate. And at 4K, like, that's fine, right? So obviously he's questionable chalk to me in tournaments. Like, I would just hope to not have to rely on that in tournaments as a relief of salary. But for cash games, I think it's totally fine at 4K.
Yeah, there's other dudes in the 4K range that it's like, Jerry Judy's going to project fine, but
I can't.
Are we really doing this? Are we playing this game again? Also, are we playing the Elijah Moore 3.2K, like 30 targets, but like for negative yards game?
Oh, man. So what's interesting about the slate is that, of course, with the Amari trade, there's a lot of value on Cleveland. But I was looking at the prop, markets and stuff. Like, Deshaun Watson right now is projected to throw for, according to DraftKings, less than 190 yards. That's where his line is at, like 180 something. So I would be super careful about how many of these guys you play in cash together. I personally don't want to. Just even in good matchups, Deshaun has fallen on his face over and over and over again. And personally, I lean Njoku if I'm going to pick one. But I think they deserve to be in your player pool as, again, just ways to save salary and get up to Jefferson and, Neighbors and Kyron and whoever else you want. But yeah, for me, it's a max 1 on Cleveland.
Have you seen Deshaun Watson's price?
I think it's 4,900, isn't it?
It is. Like, if you wanted to do a Deshaun Watson triple stack with Judy, Elijah Moore, and Njoku, like, it's like cheaper than like a double stack with like...
I bet it projects decently well.
Oh, and people are going to play these guys as like one-off pieces. Maybe one of them has a good PPR game. And I would say Njoku is my favorite because at tight end, his price fits in great at 4,100. So I think of the Browns guys, I won't be playing more than one in cash.
Agreed.
Okay, cool. Glad we're on the same page. I just didn't know if you were still holding out stuff for all your Elijah Moore deep feelings and takes.
He was good his rookie year, man. I don't know what to say.
He was a second round pick.
The Jets broke him. Okay, he was good his rookie year, and they broke him. And yeah, the Judy truthers are going to be just doing victory laps when he goes, 4 for 50 and no touchdown.
Did we mention Jordan Whittington?
Not yet. So we're waiting on Cooper Kupp, who looks like he could be back this week. I think it's a no questions asked. Like, if Kupp is out, Whittington is an awesome play at 4,800 against the Raiders. Last 2 weeks without Kupp and Puka, he saw 9 and 10 targets. So if you're getting that from a guy that's priced around 4,800, that's going to project very, very well. The only question I have is, do you play him or is he playable if Cooper Kupp is back in the lineup?
I can't do it.
Okay. So we have a very clear flow sheet of Kupp out, Whittington in, Kupp in, no Whittington.
Yeah, he's another player that I would look to move off in tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think I like him in cash, but I could probably go elsewhere. At tight end, so we mentioned David Njoku, 4.1. He's probably going to be up there. Brock Bowers is going to be another player that if you can fit him in there, think of him as a 5,800 wide receiver and just say, how does he project at this price point as a wide receiver? If you want to punt, we talked about Theo Johnson or Jatavian Sanders is fine. I also want to throw out Colby Parkinson at 3,800. You could do worse.
Yeah, you could. Again, though, with Kupp in, are you interested?
Kupp out, maybe Parkinson in.
Cooper Kupp and James Cook are the keys to the slate.
Do you think Cooper Kupp plays?
I think he probably does, but they're so smart with him and so conservative. And I look at the game and I'm like, man, could they beat this Raiders team without Cooper Kupp? Probably. Off the bye.
They better. For the sake of my survivor pool.
For your survivor pool, they better. They probably could, but from what I've seen in video, he looks good in practice. So I think it's just going to come down to how he feels, Thursday and Friday's practice and go from there. But he's getting very close. If it's not this week, I think it's certainly next week.
All right. Lastly, defense. I don't care. Under 3K, pick somebody. Probably the Browns. But
yeah,
I
like the Bengals. I mean, the Bengals themselves have not been great defensively, but you talk about our schedule adjusted, metrics we have on the site for fantasy points. It's just green across the board for defenses playing against the Browns. Deshaun Watson, we know the story, is just terrible. Most sacks in the league taken. Offensive lineman still out. Now no Amari Cooper, yada, yada, yada. they're great. The problem is we need all the money we can get on this slate. So I would rather play Cleveland at 2,500. Yes. They've still been good at getting after the passer, 4th in pressure rate this year. But we talked about that a little bit on our Tuesday show. It's just that Deshaun Watson's playing so poorly that they're on the field all the time, and eventually you will break when that happens. But Joe Burrow's going to drop back and throw a lot. They can get after the passer, so it makes a ton of sense to me. 2,500.
Yeah, I kind of like Cleveland. Joe Burrow has never won in Cleveland. In fact, the Bengals have not won in Cleveland since 2017, the great Andy Dalton versus Deshaun Kaiser matchup.
Man, I forgot about it. That's a name I haven't heard in a while.
Dude, he had a little moment where, like, in DFS, we played him just because he could run.
Yeah, I remember that. Those
and
were the
he was
days.
really bad. He was really bad, like really, really bad.
I also
like
remember that.
When I do searches for players, like I was doing one for Deshaun Watson of like, what's his yards per attempt? It's 5.1. Like, how bad is that through 6 starts? The dudes that show up is like Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Deshaun Kaiser, and then, I hate to say it, but, you know, OGs need this. Mike Glennon showed up on there.
Oh, no. Mikey G, our king.
I try to only bring out really good stats for him because, you know, he was an NFL quarterback. Like, that's awesome, dude. You like made life-changing money, probably sitting pretty right now.
He's probably having a great life.
Oh man, imagine if like that was our life. It was like, oh, were you a quarterback? Yeah, I kind of was for a little bit. These guys started me in DFS that one week, and now like I just get to like go to my kids' stuff.
He is living just. I mean, he's probably on the beach right now. He's like you last week on the beach, got a drink in his hand, just living the good life. And you know, we'll never forget him because he is in our artwork. For those that don't know, on the show.
Oh yeah, our next section. I'm looking right at his face right now. Michael Joseph Glenton. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Coca-Cola Creations. You love the taste of Coca-Cola and love the cookie crunch of Oreos. But what happens when the best drink and the best cookie in the world get together? The best becomes besties. Try the new Coca-Cola Zero Sugar Oreo Limited Edition. Besties for a limited time. Taste it while it lasts. Copyright 2024. The Coca-Cola Company. Copyright 2024. Mondelez International Group.
So, you want to be a marketer. It's easy. You just have to score a ton of leads and figure out a way to turn them all into customers. Plus, manage a dozen channels, write 1 million blogs, and launch 100 campaigns all at once. When that's done, simply make your socials go viral and bring in record profits. No sweat. Okay, fine. It's a lot of sweat. But with HubSpot's AI-powered marketing tools, launching benchmark-breaking campaigns is easier than ever. Get started at HubSpot.com/marketers.
In fact, I'm looking at the buttons on my Stream Deck right now. His face is there too, right next to Jeffrey the giraffe from Toys R Us. Not a sponsor.
We're idiots.
Yeah, not a sponsor because they're dead. All right, moving on.
Stack Attack.
You Toys R Us kid growing
Back
up?
in the day. Oh, yeah.
Kids will never know. They'll never understand.
It's gone.
So yeah, hey kids, where do you want to get this? Oh, just dad, order off Amazon. Don't have to go to the store.
Man, when you were a kid and you could just like it was your birthday or something, and your parents would take you like pick out whatever you want. You get one thing, just pick it out. It's like, oh, dude, that was the best, absolute best.
Yeah, I have great memories of getting baseball cards and just getting that pack. It could be anything in there. Literally anything could show up in this pack, and most of the time it was worthless cardboard. And I love baseball cards, but man, the 90s were the worst time to grow up for sports cards. Like we were so it was so saturated that you and I just bought a bunch of stuff that's not worth anything.
That's true. I have actually not even I probably have like 3 shoe boxes still in my parents' basement. They're like, when are you getting these? When are you going to do with these? Like, Mom, those are going to be worth millions one day. Like, we're not getting rid of those. You got to save those.
My kids still look at mine sometimes, and I have some that I feel good about. I do have a almost complete collection of MLB Showdown cards, which was a game that you played back in the day. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I just want somebody on X to like hit me up and say, dude, Showdown changed my life, because I still look at those cards all the day. Okay, we've got 4 games, Betz. We're going to blitz through them, and we're going to talk about how these games could go right and how they could go wrong, because in DFS, we're trying to figure out leverage and different spots where, hey, is the field going to do this? So the first game, Carolina Panthers at the Washington Commanders. We joked that we had no idea that this would be the game that we're talking about, but here we are. Washington -8, over-under is now 52. These defenses are bad. In fact, earlier, Betz, you said, and I quote on this podcast, the Panthers have no talent. And I almost feel like they're probably taking this clip and Dave Canales is showing it to the boys saying, do you hear this podcaster saying you guys have no talent? And then it just gets them in a frenzy and they're still probably going to be bad. But man, I want them to play that.
Bulletin board material for the Panthers this week. I mean, offensively, they got some talent. Deontay's nice. Chuba looks good. Jonathan Brooks you like. Leggett, we'll see. But yeah, defense, it's quite bad.
Yeah. Where do you want to start here? Because I feel like it sets up pretty well where if you're going to stack one side, let's say you stack Jaden with McLaurin, or, Ertz is gaining targets. Eckler's certainly viable. He leads all running backs in yards per touch. But let's say you wanted to skinny stack the Washington side, you'd bring back with Chuba or Deontay. And that's it. Like, you're not really trying to get too cute elsewhere. So how else would you play this game?
So I think that's one way to think about it, is the Jaden side. Obviously, like you said, you stack it with Terry. That's why I want to play it with Terry, just because he's been so involved, especially around the end zone as far as his target share and everything. But I think one way to also play this game is you could just take one of these cheap guys, say that Jaden is good, not great. Like if you stack Jaden with someone, you want him and McLaurin to go for 45, 50 points, something like that. But like, what if Jaden, for some reason, has a floor game and it's not elite? I think it's going to be great, but what if it's not, right? Like Noah Brown at 4K, dude saw 8 targets last week. Nobody's playing him. You talk about leverage off of Juju. That makes sense to me. And I think if you are playing a Jaden stack, including Ertz, and just tacking on and saying, I hope he catches a touchdown and I hope this game has more play volume than we think, is a way to go about it. It's really hard to say negative things about this team against the Panthers. They've got that 30-point implied total. More money is coming on Washington, so the line has moved in favor of Washington. So it all just makes sense. But yeah, then on the Panthers side, like Deontay is the key. If Deontay is out, Leggett becomes chalk, in my opinion. Chuba is mega, mega chalk. And then I think even like Jatavian Sanders becomes chalk. So now you have a question of like, do you really want to get into this game? Do you want to fade it? How many pieces do you want if it's popular? So at that point, it becomes more of a game theory question to me, more than anything. So obviously we need Deontay news for that, but that's how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, the thing that scares me about this game is that there's obvious chalk, that the field is overconfident in this game hitting the over. And my take is it's a 50-plus point total. So what am I going to do?
Let me think about it. Let me crunch some numbers here. Boop, 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 boop. Oh, you know what? The model's spitting out under.
Yeah, I'm just telling you, like, I feel like there's a lot here that would just force this game under. Like, let's say Carolina gets the lead early. They're going to feed Chuba. This whole game environment is just going to go down. And then Washington's weird because their pace of play is slow, but they have the no huddle rate that's historic, 57% of their plays. And so there's kind of this back and forth where I could just see this game hitting the under. So I think as a whole, my stance is I will probably be underweight if in large field this game, because I just feel like there's too much chalk. Now, playing somebody like Chuba, because there's all this opportunity, like you can't get away from that. And at 6,500, if he scores 20 points, you're happy in a tournament. You can go somewhere else. But I did want to throw out a dart throw in this game, though.
Oh, I would love that.
Jalen Coker.
Sneaky. Only if Deontay's out, or even if Deontay's in?
Yeah, if Deontay's out. But
okay.
He might get a bump. But Jalen Coker's running ahead of Jonathan Mingo, who, once again, another second-round player who, why was he drafted there? So he's an undrafted free agent. He's out of Holy Cross. He did have some good production in college. But I just think that he's a name that you need to monitor as at least somebody on your radar. I'm not, this is dart throw stuff. This isn't calling a shot or anything, but just another name to throw out there. Maybe it's just for Dynasty too. But, and then Noah Brown, somebody we talked about too, is like another dart throw in this game.
Yeah, for sure. And like I mentioned, he's an interesting pivot off of Juju. Exact same price on DK. He's going to come with, I don't even know, a third, a fourth of the roster percentage of Juju. So to me, that makes a lot of sense.
The old PPP.
The old PPP, the old price point pivot.
Yeah, and Noah Brown is contractually obligated to show up 3 times a year.
That's it. and then just disappear for the rest of the season.
He has the same contract as Darius Slayton.
And Slayton's already done his part.
I love Slayton, man. I wish he was like on a different team. But so my take is I would take the under.
Oh, man. It's scary to take an under in this game because I think Washington is going to roll. I already talked about it on the Tuesday show. I'm just going to stick with it. Give me the over on the team total.
All right, next game. Oh, baby. Seattle Seahawks at the Atlanta Falcons as a 51-point over-under. Atlanta, of course, favored by 3 at home. What could possibly go wrong? Let me just say this before we go any further. I think Seattle wins this game.
Oh, no. Kyle, every week you're on the show, you tell me this is the biggest home field advantage not just in the NFL, in sports. You cannot come into this stadium and expect to win. But you're telling me you expect Seattle to win. So what do we do with that information?
There's so much to like in this game as a whole, right? We talked about the neutral pace. We talked about the pass rate. Like, it's not hard to look at Geno plus Kirk and say those two are going to combine for 70 plus pass attempts. So I think you can stack up either side. I mean, Kirk O'Chains is more than just a vibe at this point. He's a way of life.
He's a lifestyle.
He's a lifestyle brand. So yeah, I just think that there's a lot. So Geno, when he's in a clean pocket this year, number 1 in pass success rate in the NFL. The Falcons have never had a pass rush since I've been born. Like, it's just John Abraham, like 10, 15 years ago, whatever. Like, we just don't. So I think Geno's in a really good spot. I think he's going to be chalk. And so Geno double stacks are the way that you do that. There's a lot of different combinations too. Like, I'm adding Ken Walker as a pass catcher that you can stack with Geno. So if you want to do Geno, Ken Walker, and then like JSN or Lockett, I feel like that's totally fine. Or Geno, Metcalf, and Lockett. One of those I think is a really, really good way to set things up. And then you pick somebody like Drake London on the other side or Mooney and you move forward. It's just, there's so many combinations in this game. I'm not really worried about running into all the chalk. Although London, Mooney are going to be the most popular.
Yes. On the Seattle side, I think JSN is so interesting. Atlanta has seen the second highest target share to slot wide receivers. It kind of feels like a big game is going to come from him sooner than later. It's been these kind of, like 6 for 70, 5 for 50 type stat lines. I mean, again, just I want to bet on Geno throwing more than 1 touchdown pass. And this is the game and the environment to do it. So I like JSN quite a bit, especially on FanDuel where he is just 6,100. He is super, super cheap. But also DK Metcalf, man, like, we all watched the game last Thursday. He's on the sideline. He's calling out Ryan Grubb. He sees the 11 targets. He only catches 3 of them. Like, when you look at all the expected point models and regression and all the nerdy stuff that you love, Kyle, Metcalf is like the dude this week, right? So I think DK Metcalf is super interesting. I don't think he's going to get played that much just because we talked about Neighbors, we talked about Jefferson, Amon-Ra, I mean, all these guys, London at the same price point. All these guys are tough to fit. So Metcalf, I think, is going to fall through the cracks a little bit. I like him quite a bit on this slate.
Yeah, London and Metcalf are right there at the same price. So another PPP for those of you out there that love that kind of stuff.
Also,
Kirk,
Justin Simmons, the safety for Atlanta, probably not playing this week. He left last week with a hamstring injury.
Yeah, there's some injuries in secondary on both sides. So I think that's something you need to monitor. We usually say, who cares about cornerback matchups? I actually think that Seattle's Reek Woolen is somebody you do care about if he's there against London. But Kirk's not going to be played as much either with Geno being the cash quarterback. So, there's just a lot there. What do you do about the running backs in this game?
Man, last week felt so obvious to play Bijan against Carolina.
So obvious.
So obvious. Algiers still seeing so much work though, man. So I don't know. I don't have a strong lean on those guys, like how good they are, how strong they are in this spot, because I just think the pass rate is really where I want to go in this game environment. Carolina, like, they invite opponents to run on them because they can't stop it. Seattle, while they're not incredible in the run game, they've just been burnt in the pass game so much that I just want to lean into Kirk. So I think Bijan's always a good play. It's a ceiling case for him is very much in play. Algier, never really projects great because he doesn't catch the football that much, and it's tough to give him a ton of usage. But if Atlanta gets control of this game and they do get up to a lead, Bijan and Algier could get fed. So that's one way to think about it in tournaments is hey, Atlanta covers the spread. They take care of business at home with this just raucous crowd. You can't win there. and and those two get all the touches. That's what you need to play them, kind of like we saw last week. So that world exists. I'm lower on that idea this week than last week, though.
Yeah, Algier feels like a player that I just won't chase. He won't be my player pool.
Yeah, he's tough. I think he's more of like a FanDuel only large field, hope he gets you 70 yards and a touchdown kind of thing at 5,800. On DraftKings 5,100, it's fine, but you got to catch the ball a little bit to pay it off.
Yeah, so the Falcons over the last 3 games, which they've won, 72% of their targets been in the wide receiver. So I think on FanDuel, this is a game where you stack it up with Kirk, you double stack. Pitts is also somebody that you can think about. Seattle's been terrible against the tight end position. He's quietly been pretty good recently, which almost feels like you're jinxing something. But I just think there's a lot of things to like in this game. I would, Atlanta fans might hate me, but I would take Seattle on the points.
That's sad. I'm going to take with some key...
That's pessimism speaking, by the way.
Yeah, with some key secondary injuries and the pass rate, I will take the over 51 points.
Okay, I'm fine with that. Totally fine with that. We will be talking about one of these players in this game later. So a little pro tease right there. Next game is the NFC North battle that we all want to see. Detroit Lions at the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings are 2-point home favorites. The over-under is now at 50, so it's been bet up a little bit. And the reason why we like this game is because it's very clear what you can and cannot do against these teams. You can't run. It just hasn't worked for any other offense this year. And so through 5 games, Minnesota, their defense has seen the 3rd most total pass attempts from their opponents of any team over the last decade. So it's like teams are like, we can't do this. We can't run the ball. And you look at the Detroit side and you go, okay, there's 2 running backs on there. We know that that's their identity. It's what they want to do. Their offensive line has been great. But at the end of the day, it just doesn't work out as well. So Gibbs and Monty are interesting in this game because the narrative is you can't run. We don't need to play them. Let's lean in the passing game. I think there is a lot of leverage you can have in tournaments, but where do you want to start talking?
Yeah, let's start on that Detroit side because I think it's super interesting. And I think the way that you have to play this game is you have to ask yourself, whenever we talk about Jared Goff, the conversation is always pressure or not. If he's not under pressure, dude slays. If he's under pressure, usually it's not very good. This offensive line has just been so good, but you talked about this, a little bit like historically when he's been blitzed, it has not been pretty. But if they blitz him and they can keep him upright and in a clean pocket, he's going to shred this defense. So I think Goff is a very high variance tournament play, and therefore his pass catchers are high variance tournament plays where if the O-line does well, I think he's going to have a very, very nice game and a game that could shoot out and go back and forth. So I like Goff for tournaments this week. If you say the run game fails and you say that they have trouble moving the football that way because of the matchup, then I think leaning into Goff is really interesting. I think Amon-Ra is an unbelievable play this week. He's 8,300, so relative to Jefferson, I think he's going to get played less frequently. He's too expensive to be in the cash game conversation because everyone's going to want to play Jefferson. Everybody's dipping down to the 6K range. It's very tough to make him work. But man, when Goff is blitzed, he is the dude that Jared Goff goes to over and over again. So I think he's an unbelievable play on this slate who's going to fall through the cracks, relatively speaking. I mean, he'll be played a little, but not under the 20s, I don't think. I think maybe somewhere in the teens is probably a safe projection for his ownership.
Yeah, the chalk in this game is just going to be Jefferson and Amon-Ra. Even when you look at Jameson Williams or Jordan Addison, I think they both are great tournament plays. It's just not going to be players that people go overboard. So I think I'm looking at this game more of where can you gain leverage? Because it wouldn't shock me if Addison goes for 100 and a score. And
definitely
at 5,600, he's the play. Same thing with Jameson Williams, who's cheap on FanDuel, 6,500. The Vikings have allowed the 3rd highest explosive pass play. So I'm almost more interested in figuring out which one of the secondary guys you play. You could easily play Amon-Ra and Jefferson, but you run into a salary problem. So it's almost give me Jefferson and Jameson on the other side and get out of this game. Or give me Amon-Ra and Addison and get out of this game. Or if you want to play Jefferson, one of the running backs, and you say, no, I mean, nobody's going to play these guys because they're kind of cannibalizing each other. So does that make sense, my take?
Yeah, I think the salary thing is the tricky part with Jefferson and Amon-Ra both being so expensive. But yeah, you could play the Detroit running backs nobody's playing. And I mean, the matchup isn't good, but this is one of the best offensive lines and the best running back duo in the league. So yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense in tournaments. particularly Gibbs, where like he doesn't even have to do that much as a runner to get there. He's so explosive in the pass game that he could get there that way. So that is an interesting take. I will say, you mentioned Jefferson and Amon-Ra being like the chalk in this game. Right now, we are projecting 4%, and I'm seeing across the industry somewhere around 5, 6, 7% is kind of consensus. So I actually don't think he's going to be played.
Of what? Amon-Ra?
Yeah. So I think he's going to be a great tournament play.
That's shocking to me.
I think it's just a price thing, right? Jefferson's $200 more. I would rather play Jefferson, but I think everybody agrees.
Okay. Well, that's shocking to me. I will say, I wish Aaron Jones, if I knew Aaron Jones was playing this game, I would be even higher on stacking up this game, just because of what else it unlocks. Any interest in stacking up Sam Darnold?
I mean, he's cheap enough that it could work. I think the thing with Darnold that's been so tricky for me is he's just been so efficient. It's been unreal. Like, he doesn't have that many pass attempts this year. They've just been blowing teams out, and he's just doing it all in the first half that he hasn't had to do much. But and this is a spot where, like, certainly the Lions could put up points and fight back, and this could be one of those over games. So yeah, I think Darnold's interesting. Tack on Jefferson, tack on Addison, and move on. Yeah,
it makes sense. I mean, you have a bunch of dudes in this range, so I don't think he's going to be played wildly. It's like people are going to play Geno. Cousins is right there. Goff's a little bit further up. So yeah, I think it's totally fine. My take is that I think the Lions just win this game.
Yeah, it is kind of surprising that they're not favored.
Yeah, I'd take the Lions.
Go Lions.
Okay. All right, let's take a quick break, and we'll talk about one more game. All right, we're going to talk about one more. It's the Houston Texans at the Green Bay Packers. Two young quarterbacks who are super fun to talk about. Jordan Love, CJ Stroud. Jordan Love is maybe the craziest player for me to project week to week. Like, he's the hardest for me to wrap my head around because number one in fantasy points per dropback against zone. Sweet. That sounds amazing. He has the lowest sack rate in the league. It sounds like he's the best. And yet he's only completing 59% of his passes. And week to week, I have no idea if he's going to go for 35 or... Like, it wouldn't shock you at all if Jordan Love had 12 DK points.
I mean, 12 would shock me, but like 16, that's not shocking.
He's no longer cheap where you can get away with that stuff at 6,900. And especially on FanDuel, 8,700. No, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty easy fade on FanDuel. It's just a price thing.
Yeah. The thing I want to stress about this game before you just think I'm going to stack this up, it's at 47.5, is that I think both of these teams want to run the ball. Green Bay is fourth in neutral rush rate. Josh Jacobs, we have it in here, 119 total touches, and he has just one more touchdown than you, Betz. So that's not going to last. And then Houston, their metrics are really hard to figure out because you've only had Mixon really for two full games, and their neutral rush rate was 8th in week 1 and 5th last week. So I think these teams want to run the ball, which gives me some pause from stacking it up.
Yeah, I do agree. And I think, Green Bay, they have had awesome scoring with Love in the lineup. We've talked about that with his touchdown rate and with their ability to hit explosive plays, big plays down the field. And that's what you want if you stack this game, obviously. But the thing about it is that's tricky is, like you said, I think they want to lean on the run game. And when you invite that sort of situation, then it becomes a situation where the pace is a concern. So, and I think Houston, like you said, is kind of the same, where like they need to get sped up to really get there. We saw that a couple weeks ago in the Buffalo game. They didn't really have that shootout that we all were hoping for. So I have a very similar feeling about this, where I could see one of these wide receivers or one of these running backs being a very, very good play. But I have a tough time seeing this one go bonkers, personally.
The running backs, I think, are the ones that intrigue me if I want to play contrarian, because they're kind of in that tier where they're going to get some roster percentage, but like I'm seeing Jacobs and Mixon way lower, kind of in this 7 through 10 range of running backs where, it wouldn't shock either of us if they go for 20, 25. Jacobs gets in the end zone. He gets a 100-yard bonus. They ride him at home. And then Mixon has maybe the most elite red zone role of any running back in football right now. And he's a little bit more expensive, but I like both of these running backs as if you wanted to play a chalkier build, and stack up other games and then say, I'm just going to pick one of these running backs in here. I think the Texans are the better team. They win. Joe Mixon is the guy, or the same thing with Jacobs. Like, I think that's a way to attack this game.
Yeah, I agree. The wide receiver situation, Diggs and Tank, they're both totally fine plays just to bet on the ceiling and bet on Stroud. Like, that's in tournaments, that's fine for me. The wide receivers, though, on the other side with Green Bay, I was really hoping we might get Wicks out, or maybe Watson's injury would be a play here that could just make this so clear of who to play. And it's very unclear who to play when they rotate that many guys. Like, Dobbs only had 4 targets last week, 2 touchdowns. Like, that's very hard to repeat. Watson only had a couple catches, but he had the big play. So there's just so much variance to me that all these guys I think are okay tournament plays, but I'm not really like in love with any of them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's really hard to kind of parse through them. Diggs has been really consistent, not really shown the ceiling that you want. Came back to life this past week. Yeah, I always tell you with the Packers, I always feel like I'm going to pick the wrong guy. That it's Dobbs this week, or, Watson had the touchdown last week. So I have such a hard time. Houston has allowed the second most passing touchdowns. So that's there. Okay, I'm just going to mention it. Both tight ends, I think, are interesting. Below the radar, Dalton Schultz.
I was going to say, I kind of like the doctor.
Dude, nobody likes the doctor right now, but you and I can at least talk him up as somebody you could play in a tournament. So Nico was out last week, and then the targets kind of shifted. Almost 30% of them went to the tight ends. They ran a ton of 12 personnel. Cade Stover, the rookie, also saw a ton of snaps, 50%. And Dalton Schultz is out there a ton. Green Bay's 28th against the tight end this year. I don't mind him, and I also don't mind Tucker Kraft. I think he's kind of been removed from, he was chalk a couple weeks ago. He hit. Last week it didn't hit, and now people are kind of moving on from him. So I think both of these tight ends are just going to go super, not super low, but I think people won't play them that much.
Yeah, Schultz is super interesting just in the matchup. You have in our doc here, 28th in schedule adjusted points allowed to tight ends are the Packers. And, Schultz is a guy that he really needs that third piece gone. Like with Diggs, Tank, and Nico all there, like it's just so unlikely to happen. But now you remove Nico, and we saw it potentially could happen. So, yeah, I think Dalton Schultz is very interesting. And again, we just talk about where is all of the roster percentage going to funnel to on this slate. David Njoku is 4,100, $100 more, Dalton Schultz. So, yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
I don't have a great read. I think the line is right. I think -2.5. Like if it's at 3 or 3.5, then I'd clearly take the Texans. So, I think I would just take Packers at home.
Yeah, that's a fair take. I'll agree.
Yeah, I can see scenarios where this game really does go over, but I think my favorite pieces are the running backs and the tight ends, which is kind of weird to say, but
that is weird.
But here we are.
Slate Breaker of the Week.
I really had to do some digging this week.
Oh, for a sponsor.
For a sponsor. Yes. No, that's exactly what I was talking about. I was totally thinking about a sponsor.
I thought that's what you meant.
No, I was thinking about my pick. It wasn't until 5 seconds ago that I remember that this segment has a sponsor.
Oh, perfect.
So, yeah, no. We couldn't get Toys R Us, so we actually had to get an even lower budget version. We got KB Toys for our sponsor this year.
I don't even know what that is.
That is a really weak toy store that tried to be Toys R Us and didn't work out.
That explains it.
All right. I'm going to take Kenneth Walker as my slate breaker of the week. It pains me to do it, but I think he's going to come in 5th or 6th in roster percentage. And that may not sound like, I'm digging too far deep, but what I've found with running backs is you look at guys that have a similar projection. Kyron Williams, Chuba Hubbard, all of these guys that are kind of right there. It's like they could all score the same. But it wouldn't shock me if Kenneth Walker found the end zone twice in this game, Seattle wins, and if he's just leverage over Geno, like Geno is the cash game quarterback, so why not just play the running back? That's just classic stuff. Or you can include him as a stacking partner, and his passing work is super strong, right? Like we've seen 21 targets in the last 3 games. So I think Kenneth Walker is one of those players that I plan on being overweight this week.
The Bone Zone. All right.
Oh,
I like it. I want to talk about a player that we briefly mentioned that I think is going to be played, 10, 12, maybe it gets seemed to 15%, but I don't think it's going to get out of hand with Malik Neighbors. So for me, he's in that secondary tier of chalk that if he's going to be around 15 to 10, like sign me up against this Eagles defense. The last time we saw Malik Neighbors on the field, all the dude was doing was leading the NFL in targets and catches, and now he's going to be played way less than he would have just because we haven't seen it in quite some time. So Malik Neighbors in this spot against the Eagles is my slate breaker, 7,500 on DraftKings.
And we were talking earlier when I saw you put this in there, and I thought this is the best spot to mention Daniel Jones's name.
You think it's a Danny Dimes week?
I'm just saying, no one's talking about him. When the whole world is not thinking about Daniel Jones, that's when he finally comes through. He's averaged 40 rushing yards per game against the Eagles in his career. 40.
Okay. You have me intrigued. What are we going to do here? We're going to go, let's talk about this. We're going to go Dimes to Neighbors, skinny stack it. I mean, Saquon in a revenge game with the Giants defensive line in complete shambles. They've got injuries to Kayvon Thibodeau. Dexter Lawrence was on the injury report. Like, they've got major issues. So we could be cooking there, brother. Let me tell you what.
Yeah, and then we just throw in Jefferson and Amon-Ra and have no salary left.
Yeah, Saquon's interesting. We didn't talk about him. How are you handling Saquon on this slate? Because I kind of want to play him just with the narrative, but 8,200, he's tough to fit.
Yeah, he's another player that's like going to project really well, not going to be played a ton. So, it's like Kyron's going to be super chalky. What do you do there?
Pivot.
I guess you do. This is what I hate about DFS, because right now we're at the point of the week where I could totally convince myself that Saquon could be a slate breaker.
Oh yeah, big time.
But I already picked the bone zone.
Okay, well then we're going with the bone zone.
Okay, but I'll play some Saquon lineups. That'll be fun.
It's time for Borg versus Betz, presented by DraftKings.
You don't have a sports book? No problem. You can play DraftKings Pick 6 with us. And through 7 weeks, I'm 9-3, Betz is 7-4. We are still cooking. We're on a heater. So we're going to give you a couple of lines that we like. I do need to mention that after us doing this, some of them might change. So make sure that you get to look for the best line. But I will be taking Michael Pittman Jr., which is just such tears. I did take it earlier today. Less than 49.5 receiving yards. I'm shocked that this line was this high. He's been under 40 receiving yards in 5 of his 6 games. Miami's allowing the 3rd fewest passing yards per game. Oh, and Anthony Richardson's going to be his quarterback. So Pity City is not somebody. I know that he was a DMP on Wednesday because of his back.
He's back today on Thursday.
Who knows if he even wants to play, because who's at quarterback?
Oh, man. Yeah, it's tough. The pass rate with Flacco spiked quite a bit these last couple games. With Richardson, the first few games, it was, off the top of my head, 48%, 46%, something like that. It has not been pretty, and obviously the passing quality has been way worse. Richardson dead last in completion rate over expected this season. So that's sad. But I'm with you. The less makes sense. I will take Eugene Smith over 1.5 passing touchdowns. That's Geno Smith, by the way. We talked about the game. We talked about the pass rate. We talked about the dome environment, all those things. Eventually, Geno is throwing 2 touchdown passes, okay? It's been 1 in every single game. That 2.4% touchdown rate is going to regress, and I think it happens this week. So I will take more than 1.5 passing touchdowns.
What's funny is that one of the things I paired together was that exact line, because I said, this, come on, we're going to get there. We're going to get to. We don't usually like talking about passing touchdowns and mores, but that's where we're at there. Now, I'm going to take a less than. It's Jaden Daniels. Less than 242.5 passing yards. You don't like this one, huh?
No, I think it makes sense for the reasons you're going to talk about, but doesn't mean he's a bad DFS player, a fantasy player.
No.
Just the passing yardage might not be there.
Yeah, like if Jaden Daniels runs for 60 yards, then, if he throws for 230 or whatever, who cares? But less than 242.5 passing yards. Efficiency is kind of his thing. He surpasses just twice in 6 games, and Carolina has had 1 quarterback surpass this mark this year in 6 games. I think the pace of play is actually going to be a little bit doo-doo this week in that game. So Jaden Daniels less than 242.5 passing yards.
I do think as well, if Brian Robinson Jr. plays this week, if he's back, just teams run against Carolina. So that's one thing that could also work against Daniels' passing yardage in this game. So monitor that. I'm going to take another more. I got two more, Kyle. What's wrong with me?
Thought I knew you.
Drake May in the London game, I will take more than 202.5 passing yards because, well, Jacksonville. Caleb Williams, 226. Joe Flacco, 359. Stroud, 345. Josh Allen, 263. Deshaun Watson, terrible, 186. Tua, 338. So basically every quarterback that is functional has gone over this line, and May just went for over 240 last week in his first start. The matchup is too good. Give me the more on Drake May.
That was Borg versus Betz presented by DraftKings Pick 6. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code BALLERS. That's code BALLERS for new customers to play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits. That's going to do it for our show. Betz, tell the people to have a good weekend.
Yeah, I hope everybody has an awesome weekend this weekend, playing DFS, betting the props, winning your fantasy matchups, watching Seattle just stroll into Mercedes-Benz and walk out with a W and make Kyle upset. But good luck to this weekend. We will catch you guys next week on Tuesday. We'll see you then. Have a great weekend.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Void where prohibited. One per new customer. Non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits expire in 6 months. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.